Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm your brother Abu Talha Zahak. Welcome all of you to Black Magic Busting series. And in the last episode of how the black magicians invoke jinn, or how the black magicians call jinn, I spoke to you about how exactly the black magicians do the actions to call the jinn. Inshallah, in this episode, inshallah, I'll tell you about the treatment of the black magic, how to recognize if a person is suffering with black magic, and how to diagnose him, how to treat him, and inshallah at the end you'll also see how to save ourselves from the black magic in day-to-day life. The first stage of treating the black magic, which is also called as the pre-treatment stage, is that we lecture about the aqidah, the correct aqidah and the right aqidah to the household of the patient, of the victim. And if they go according to the aqidah, which is not according to Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, then we tell them to act according to the aqidah, the mainstream aqidah of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the mainstream aqidah of the Muslims. Second, we ask the household of the patient or the victim to remove the pictures or the music system or the home theater system from the house, because jinns reside or inhabit the places where people have pictures and the music system and the home theater system, because they like it, they love to live in those places. And third is we ask the patient to remove any kind of amulet or talisman or any kind of thread or band he has got on his body. We ask him to remove as soon as possible, because we cannot perform ruqya, that is the right form of the treatment on the patient who is already going through the wrong practices. The fourth one is if the men perform haram actions, we advise them, we counsel them to quit the haram actions and to perform the halal actions. For example, if men wear gold or silk or the booze, we ask them to quit all these habits, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not be on those people who oppose him. And then we advise women to wear hijab and to be Sharia abiding. They cannot intermingle with men, they cannot party, they cannot go to clubs, and they do all sorts of haram actions. At the same time, they want to get the treatment through Quran. It's not possible. So we advise women as well to be in hijab and to be Sharia abiding. And then we diagnose the patient based on some of the symptoms related to specific kinds of black magic. So let me tell you the kinds of black magic and how to recognize if a person is really going through that kind of black magic. The first kind of black magic is sihr al-tafriq, which is called as magic of separation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned about this magic in Surah 2 and Ayah 102, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that two angels, Harut and Marut, came to the city of Babylon to teach black magic. But before they taught black magic, they say that we are nothing but a trial, so don't get into kufr. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned about a magic to separate husband and wife. So this magic still exists today, and this is the greatest accomplishment for the shayateen and for the jinn, to separate husband from his wife. And in a hadith, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that shayateen, the jinn from all over the world, they go to the head jinn, the chief jinn, the chief shaitan, and they give the report of what they did all the day. One shaitan says that he separated two brothers. He said, okay, that's fine. One shaitan says that I created a fitna, a trial, and the chief says that's fine. But when a shaitan says that I created a fitna which resulted in a divorce between husband and wife, then the chief gives his seat and gives his crown. So this is the greatest accomplishment for the shayateen, for the jinn, to separate husband and wife. So how to recognize if a person is under the influence of sihr al-tafriq? The first symptom is there will be a sudden change in the attitude from love to hate. A person is normal and regular toward his wife, but all of a sudden his attitude begins to change, all of a sudden. And then there will be a great deal of suspicion between husband and wife, and there will be no acceptance of excuses. I mean, if wife presents excuses, husband will never accept it. And if husband presents excuses, then wife will never accept it. And there will be exaggeration in the causes of disputes. For example, there was no salt in the food, and the husband said that there is no salt in the food, and this is nothing but a trivial issue, but this insignificant issue becomes exaggerated and it results in a great dispute. And there will be the change in the mental image or the mental picture of both the spouses. For example, if the patient is husband, he sees his wife ugly. If the patient is wife, then she sees her husband ugly. And at the same time, victim hates anything the other party does. Anything the other party does, this will be hated much by the victim. And victim hates the place the other party stays in. For example, the husband is seated in the drawing room. The wife doesn't want to be seated in the drawing room. And if the husband is seated in the bedroom, then wife doesn't want to go there. So victim hates the place the other party stays in. So these are some of the symptoms of sihr al-tafriq, that is the magic of separation. I'll tell you the treatment of this magic in the second stage of the treatment, inshallah. Another major kind of black magic is sihr al-muhabba, that is magic of love. Some of the symptoms are excessive love and passion. Usually the boys who want to spoil girls sexually, they go to black magicians and they get a package kind of thing. I mean, 6-month package for 15,000, some kind of package the black magicians present. So they buy that package and they do all sorts of evil stuff on that. I mean, the material or something they give to burn outside the house of the girl, and no sooner the boy burns it and no sooner the girl passes over it, she becomes a victim, and the boy spoils her sexually. And the same happens if the girl wants to sexually exploit the boy. Usually the wives who are insecure about their husbands, and usually the wives who feel that their husbands may fall into any trap of any woman that in that case they go to the black magicians to get this magic done, that is sihr al-muhabba. So there will be excessive love and passion between the two parties, and there will be extreme desire to have sexual intercourse, extreme desire, unconditional desire to have sexual intercourse, and there will be impatience of remaining without having sexual intercourse, and extreme lust at the side of the other party, extreme lust and blind obedience. So these are some of the symptoms of sihr al-muhabba. Another kind of black magic is sihr al-takhil, that is false appearance of the objects, especially the victims who are under the influence of this magic. They see the fixed objects moving. I mean, they see the fixed object. For example, jug. I see the jug being static, but if the person is under the influence of sihr al-takhil, he sees this jug moving from one direction to other. And at the same time, he would see the small objects appearing large. For example, this jug appears to me a huge drum. So the person who is under the influence of this magic sees small objects large. And he sees false appearance of ropes as snakes and stationary objects as animals. So he usually sees the stationary objects as animals or the beasts of prey, like tiger, a lion, or a dog, or a hyena, or a python, or a snake, or a cobra, or any such animal, especially the beasts of prey, especially the animals, wild animals he sees in his house. Another kind of black magic is sihr al-junoon, that is the magic of lunacy. It's usually performed on the person to make him mad and lunatic. The symptoms are severe absent-mindedness and forgetfulness. Severe absent-mindedness and forgetfulness, confused speech, bulging of eyes and deviation of sight, restlessness, inability to do a task regularly. So usually the people affected with sihr al-junoon cannot do their tasks regularly, and disinterest in one's appearance. So these are some of the symptoms of sihr al-junoon. Another kind of black magic is sihr al-khumul, that is the magic to make a person lethargic. The symptoms are the person loves seclusion. He doesn't want to mingle up with anyone. He loves to be secluded, and he loves to be alone, absolute introversion and constant silence, and anti-sociability, absent-mindedness, frequent headaches, and quietness and constant lethargy. So these are the symptoms of sihr al-khumul. Another kind of black magic is sihr al-hawatif, that is a person sees bad dreams and hears voices from nowhere. and the symptoms are experiencing nightmares, and in dreams he sees that someone is calling him, and he hears voices while awake but cannot see. I mean, he's seated and someone calls him, shh, shh, and it turns and no one's there. So he hears voices while awake but cannot see, and constant waswas, that is whispering, and suspicion about friends and relatives, and victim sees himself as falling from high place in the dreams, and victim sees himself as being chased by the beasts and the beasts of prey in the dreams. So these are the symptoms of sihr al-hawatif, bad dreams and hearing voices. Another kind of black magic is sihr al-marad, or the magic of illness, and it's usually done on the person to make him constantly ill. So the jinn occupy the place in the brain, and it plays with the nervous system, which is responsible for the functioning of the body parts. So there will be constant pain in one part of the body, and there will be epilepsy and paralysis of one area of the patient's body, and total paralysis and disability in one of the sense of organs. So these are the symptoms of sihr al-marad. Another kind of black magic is sihr al-nazif, that is bleeding following menses. Usually it's done on women. So the women affected with this magic, this kind of black magic, they constantly bleed. So they stay in the state of impurity. So usually the jinn kicks the part which is responsible for bleeding. So the women affected with this magic constantly bleed. So inshallah we'll see the treatment of this magic inshallah in the second stage of the treatment. Another kind of black magic which is done to impede the marriage, that is called a sihr of impeding marriage. So some of the symptoms are make the victim uncomfortable about the proposal. So for example, the victim is boy, so whatever proposal he gets, he rejects it. So he gets uncomfortable about any proposal. If the victim is girl, then she becomes uncomfortable about any kind of proposal, and make the victim look ugly to the other part. So for example, people have come to meet and to see the boy, then he looks ugly. And sometimes the proposal looks ugly to the victim. And occasional headaches, severe tightness in the chest between Asr and midnight, and absent-mindedness, anxiety during sleep, occasional constant stomach aches, and pain in the lower back. So these are the symptoms of sihr of impeding marriage. Another kind of black magic which is called as sihr al-rabt, that is a kind of magic performed on men who get erection problems during lovemaking. So some of the symptoms are the spouse looks old and ugly to the victim. The spouse looks old and ugly to the victim. And the person stays medically fit at non-lovemaking occasions, but erection problem during intercourse. And he usually gets occasionally gets headaches and severe tightness in the chest between Asr and midnight, and absent-mindedness, anxiety during sleep, and pain in the lower back. So these are the symptoms of sihr al-rabt. So these were some of the kinds of black magic, major kinds of black magic. Now let's see the second stage of the treatment. The second stage, that is the treatment stage. I'll tell you a list of standard ayats from the Quran, which are called as the ruqya ayats. So note down these ayats. And in all the major kinds of black magic, or in any kind of black magic, you recite these ayats over the patient, and while reciting, the jinn reacts. So when you recite these ayats over the jinn, and when the jinn reacts, and when the jinn starts speaking, you ask the jinn about his name and his religion and the purpose for which he came. So when you ask his name and he says that my name is John or Joseph or Bilal or Ahmad or whatever, I mean, if he's a Muslim, he says the Muslim name, and if he's a Christian, he says Christian name, and if he's a Hindu, he says the Hindu name. And no sooner he tells you the name, you ask him his religion, and you ask him the purpose, I mean the reason for which he came. He says that I like this person, I love this person, and he was passing without hijab, and she was passing without hijab, and he was passing by, and I love him, I liked him, so I just got onto him. So he would tell this reason, the reason of possession, or in many cases he would say that someone, XYZ black magician, has sent me to overpower this person and to trouble him. So in these cases, you keep reciting these ayats over the person, and you blow these ayats over the water, and you give the patient to drink this water and to wash himself with. So the ayats are, the first is Surah Al-Fatiha. You recite Surah Al-Fatiha, and then you recite Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 1 to 5, and ayah 102, 163, 164, 255 and 285 and 286, and Surah Al-Imran and ayah 18 and 19, Surah Al-Araf ayah 54 and 56, and Surah Al-Araf ayah 117 and 122, and Surah Yunus ayah 81 and 82, and Surah Taha ayah 869, and Surah Al-Mu'minun ayah 115 to 118, and Surah As-Safat ayah 1 to 10, and Surah Al-Haqaf ayah 29 and 32, and Surah Ar-Rahman ayah 33 and 36, and Surah Al-Hashr ayah 21 to 24, and Surah Al-Jinn ayah 1 to 9, Surah Ikhlas, Surah Falaq, Surah Nas. So these ayats should be recited over the person, and once you recite these ayats, you have to blow it over water. It should be recited in a way by keeping the jug or the bottle close to your mouth. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. It has to be recited in this way by keeping the jug or the bottle close to your mouth, and once you recite it, blow it over the water, and then give this water to the patient to drink and to wash himself with. So these ayahs should be recited over the patient, and when the jinn reacts, you ask him the questions, and you punish him by reciting the ayahs. And in most cases, jinn, they try to indulge you in discussions or the dialogues. Don't get into discussions and dialogues. They love to put you into discussions and dialogues, because more you talk, less you recite the Quran, and less you recite the Quran, more they get powerful. So don't get into discussions and don't talk to them. And in 99.9 cases, they lie to you, and they just talk humbug. So don't talk to them. You recite the ayats, and you keep reciting the azan on the patient. Okay, so these ayats should be recited on the patient, and these are the standard ayats, and this is the standard procedure. And based on the symptoms, you have to modify the set of ayats. So I'll tell you what to modify in what kind of magic. For sihr of love, that is sihr al-muhabba, you have to omit Surah Al-Baqarah ayah 102 you replace it with Surah Taghabun ayah 14 to 16. You have to recite Surah Taghabun ayah 14 to 16 in place of Surah Al-Baqarah ayah 102. And you do the same thing, the same stuff. You blow it over water, you give it to the patient, and inshallah the treatment will be done. In case of sihr al-takhil, that is false appearance of the objects, you have to recite Ayat al-Kursi and announce azan at the place where the patient is seated. For example, the victim complains that he sees dogs in his house, he sees snakes in his house, and he complains that he has seen a tiger in his house. So that's actually due to sihr al-takhil. So you have to recite Ayat al-Kursi and announce azan at the place where the patient complains to see these animals. And for sihr al-junun, you have to recite Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah Hud, Surah Al-Hijr, Surah Safat, Surah Qaf, Surah Ar-Rahman, Surah Mulk, Surah Jinn, Surah Al-Ala, Surah Al-Zalzala, Surah Al-Humaza, Surah Al-Kafirun, Surah Al-Falaq, Surah Al-Nas, 2 or 3 times a day for 1 complete month. And you may complain that I cannot recite it. I'm not a hafiz. How can I recite Surah Al-Baqarah, Hud, and Al-Hijr, and Safat 2 to 3 times a day? It's not possible for me for 1 complete month. In that case, you'll get a tape, an audio tape, or audio file from internet. You can download it and play it at least 2 to 3 times a day for 1 complete month in the case of sihr al-junun, if a person is lunatic. In case of sihr al-khumul, that is the magic of letharginess, play and listen the audio tapes, 1 in the morning, 1 at Asr, and 1 at bedtime for 45 days. I repeat, play and listen the audio tapes, 1 in morning, 1 at Asr, and 1 at bedtime for 45 days. And that audio tape should contain Surah Al-Fatiha, Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah Al-Yasin, Surah Al-Imran, Surah Safat, Surah Al-Dukhan, Surah Al-Zariyat, Surah Al-Hashr, Surah Al-Ma'arij, Surah Al-Ghashiyah, Surah Al-Zalzala, Surah Al-Qariyah, and Surah Falaq and Surah Nas. That audio tape should contain all these surahs. And in case of Sihr al-Hawatif, that is nightmares and bad dreams, in that case, the patient should recite the supplications before going to bed, which you find in Hisn al-Muslim, Fortress of Muslim, and he has to recite Surah As-Safat in the morning and Ad-Dukhan before going to bed. Ad-Dukhan before going to bed and Surah As-Safat in the morning. So besides reciting Surah As-Safat in the morning and Ad-Dukhan before going to bed, the patient has to listen to Surah Al-Baqarah every 3 days and reciting the last 2 ayats of Surah Al-Baqarah before going to bed. Amana Rasulu bima unzila ilayhi. Those 2 ayats, and listening to Surah Al-Fussilat, Surah Al-Fatah, Surah Al-Jinn 3 times a day. Listen to what? Surah Fussilat, Surah Al-Fatah, and Surah Al-Jinn 3 times a day in case of Sihr al-Hawatif. In case of Sihr al-Marad, that is the magic of illness, the patient has to listen 3 times a day Al-Fatiha, Ayat al-Kursi, Ad-Dukhan, Al-Jinn, Surah Al-Falaq, Surah Al-Nas, and recite these surahs over black seed oil, which you call in Urdu as kalonji ka tel. So recite these ayats over black seed oil and rub over the patient. And if you don't get the black seed oil, it's common, you can get it from anywhere, but if you cannot get it, get olive oil. Even the olive oil acts as an antidote. So get olive oil and recite Surah Al-Fatiha, Ayat al-Kursi, Ad-Dukhan, Al-Jinn, Falaq and Nas over olive oil and rub over the part of the body of the patient where he complains that he feels constant pain. In case of Sihr al-Nazif, that is constant bleeding in women, recite the standard set of Ruqya ayats which I've mentioned in the 2nd stage, and advise the patient to wash her body for 3 days with that water. And that water should not be drained in the washroom. You have to drain the water somewhere where the people don't usually pass by. In case of sihr of impeding marriage, we advise women to maintain hijab, no music and songs in the house, and wudu before going to bed, and Ayat al-Kursi to be recited before going to bed. And listen to Ayat al-Kursi audio for 60 minutes. 60 minutes, 1 hour every day. Ayat al-Kursi. And Al-Muwazzitain, that is Surah Falaq and Surah Nas audio for 60 minutes. 60 minutes Ayat al-Kursi repeatedly, and 60 minutes Surah Falaq and Surah Nas. And we ask the patient to drink the water and to wash himself or herself with every 3 days with the water blown on with ruqya. In case of sihr al-rabt, that is the men who experience the erection problems due to magic, we ask them to get 7 green jujube, I don't know how you pronounce it, jujube leaves, what you call in Urdu as bear ke patte, jujube leaves, and crush them between 2 stones, and then add water to them and recite into it Ayat al-Kursi and the surahs that begin with Qul, that is Surah Al-Ikhlas, Kafirun, Falaq and Nas. Then take 3 sips of it, then wash oneself with it, and it will inshallah take away all the problems in his body. And this is good for a man who has been prevented from having intimate relationships with his wife. So this treatment is mentioned by Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani in Fatah al-Bari. So this is the treatment of sihr al-rabt. By the will and by the leave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if the patient is cured, and if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives treatment and cure through you, then in that case don't brag or don't glorify yourself. Instead glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and praise Him for the recovery. And then you advise the patient to observe salah in a group, in jama'ah, and then you ask him not to listen to songs and the music, and you ask him to be in the state of wudu as much as possible and recite Ayat al-Kursi before going to bed. And you ask him to say Bismillah before doing any task. And you ask him to recite La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu lahul mulk wa lahul hamdu wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir 100 times a day. And you ask him to read and recite or listen to Quran every day. and you ask him to be in the company of pious people, and you ask him to observe morning and evening supplications, which you find in Hisnul Muslim, Fortress of Muslim. In the last part of this video, let me give you the 15 tips of protection in our day-to-day lives to protect oneself from the black magic and the evil magicians and the jinn possession. How to protect oneself and the family and the children from black magic and evil possessions. The first tip is eat 7 pressed dates in the morning before breakfast, which you call in Arabic as ajwa dates. And ajwa dates are a bit costly. You get in Medina for 55 riyals or 50 riyals, or you ask someone who lives in Saudi to send you ajwa dates. So eat 7 ajwa dates in the morning before breakfast. Second is to be in the state of wudu or ablution as much as possible. And third one is to observe congregational prayers in Jama'ah, the 5 daily prayers in Jama'ah. And the fourth one is to perform Qiyamul Layl, that is tahajjud. Very often. To perform it very often. If you cannot do it every day, try to make it 2 to 3 times a week. And fifth one is to do istida, that is seeking a refuge with Allah upon entering the toilet. And what Prophet ﷺ said, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-khubuthi wal-khabaith, that is what Prophet ﷺ said. And he asked Muslims to recite this before entering the toilet. And usually the jinn who are ordered to possess a person through black magic, they first come and they stalk and they live in the toilets. So if you forget to recite the dua before entering the toilet, they possess you. And the sixth is seeking refuge with Allah upon starting the salah. A'udhu billahi samil alim min ash-shaytanir rajim min hamazihi wa nafaqihi wa nafsi. So this dua should be recited before you recite Surah Al-Fatiha. And seventh is protecting one's new wife against sihr at the time of marriage by holding her forehead, the hair of her forehead, and then reciting Allahumma inni as'aluka khayraha wa khayra ma jabaltaha alay wa a'udhu bika min sharriha wa sharri ma jabaltaha alay. In case if the magic is performed on her or you to get separated from the spouse, in case that magic is performed, inshallah the magic will be invalidated. The eighth is initiating marital life with salah. So the husband and wife should perform two rak'ah, and then they should ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the blessing and the mercy in their married life, and then they should begin the marital life. The ninth one is protection from shaitan during intercourse, and Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has taught this dua, Allahumma jannibna shaitan wa jannibish shaitan ma razaqtana. This dua has to be recited before sexual intercourse, and Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that if a person forgets to recite this dua, then shaitan will perform more than the husband. And the 10th is to recite Ayatul Kursi before going to bed. And the 11th is to recite La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu lahul mulk wa lahul hamdu wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir 100 times a day. The 12th is to recite A'udhu billahi al-azim wa biwajhi al-kareem wa sultanihi al-qadim min ash-shaytan al-rajim while entering the masjid. And 13th is to recite 3 times in the morning and evening Bismillahi alladhi la yadurru ma'a ismihi shay'un fil ardi wa la fis sama'i wa huwa samiul alim. And 14th is to recite the dua of entering and leaving the house. Bismillahi tawakkaltu ala Allah la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, and saying Bismillah before entering and leaving the house. And the 15th is to recite A'udhu bi kalimatillahi tammati min sharri ma khalaq 3 times in the morning and the evening. So these are the 15 tips of protection against black magic, evil jinn, and the evil eye. Here is a book by Dr. Abul Mundhir Khalil Ibn Ibrahim Amin, The Jinn and Human Sickness, Remedies in the Light of the Quran and the Sunnah. This book is available in Darussalam and it cost me 35 Saudi riyals, and you can get it in India as well, and you can get a PDF on internet as well. So I recommend this book. You read this book, and inshallah you'll get to know about various aspects of treating the black magic and the evil jinn possession. And at last I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to treat all the people of this ummah who are suffering with these diseases. And if you like this video, share it with your friends and family, and especially those people who are suffering with these diseases, and share with them through email, through Facebook, through Twitter, or whatever means you have, through WhatsApp. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the acceptance of our service, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept your good deeds. Jazakallahu khair wa ahsanul jaza. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.